Have you spent a significant amount of time living outside your passport country during your developmental years? Do you come from an expat, military, diplomat, missionary, or international business family background? If so, then this podcast is for you.
Welcome to the TCK Research Podcast, where we discuss the current state of research on third culture kids, cross-culture kids, expat families, and international life in general.
My name is Andrea Schmidt, and I've been an expat for over 30 years, having lived in a total of 9 countries. I'm a coach for TCK girls, and I'm currently completing my master's degree in psychology.
And I'm Mathieu Gagnon, an adult third culture kid who grew up in 6 countries until the age of 15. And I'm now a professor of psychology in Ontario, Canada.
Every episode, we bring you a fascinating conversation with a leading researcher in the field.
If you're listening on YouTube or another platform, please subscribe to our channel. And if you enjoyed this episode, please press the thumbs up or like button, share it on your social media platforms, or send it to a friend.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can reach us at tckresearchpod@gmail.com.
Let's jump right in.
Enjoy the podcast.
Today's guest is Dr. Yuima Mizutani. At the time of this taping, Dr. Mizutani was an assistant teaching professor at the Department of Education Sciences and Professional Programs, the University of Missouri, St. Louis. By the fall of 2025, she will be an assistant professor at the University of Cincinnati. Dr. Mizutani is also a national certified counselor, an Illinois licensed clinical professional counselor, and a Missouri licensed professional counselor. And we're talking about her 2023 paper entitled Experiences of Confucian Asian College Students with Third Culture Kid Backgrounds, published in the International Journal for the Advancement of Counselling.
Welcome to the podcast today where we talk to Yuima Mizutani. And let me represent her very quickly to you. So currently, Yuima is working at the University of Missouri, St. Louis, as an assistant teaching professor at the Department of Education Sciences and Professional Programs. She teaches a range of counseling courses, such as counseling women towards empowerment and multicultural counseling. You got your bachelor's degree in Japan, and I'm sure you're going to tell us about this. But your master's degree, you got it from the University of Missouri, and then you pursued your PhD as well there. During the doctoral program, Yuimi worked as a counselor at various sites in St. Louis, where she supported families and children from marginalized communities, immigrants, refugees, and clients in higher education. So there's a lot about you. I couldn't write everything down because there was so much information out there. We welcome you to the podcast, Yuimi. And I'm going to hand over to Mathieu, who will ask you the very first question.
All right. Well, welcome aboard, Yuima. So we like to start the podcast the same way for every guest, which is, of course, we invited you to talk about your research, but there's the research and then there's the researcher. And we're as interested in the researcher as we are in the research. So before we get started talking about your paper, can you tell us about your personal background? What is your connection to the world of third culture kid? I know you wanted to talk about the concept of cross-culture kids as well. So give us the details here. Who is Yuima Mizutani?
Yes, thank you. I'm very excited to be in this space today. So thank you for Andreas for the details information. So I'm from Japan. It's been 10 plus years. I just butchered all of the years I'm here now in the United States, but I think it was almost 14 years in St. Louis, Missouri. But I spent more than half of my life in Japan. And myself is actually not third culture kids. But what I tell everyone, like when I have opportunity to talk about third culture kids, including my studies, including myself, I'm not third culture kids because I do not have that experience on being outside of the country while I was growing up. However, I had experience of being a cross-culture kids. And that is like, my understanding is newer term than third culture kids because third culture kids was coined like 1950s. So cross-culture kids like way recent, but it's actually the nice bigger umbrella to hold, including third culture kids, but also other people with international background. So, myself, and not only international background, I want to say also like multicultural background. So myself is, of course, being the US, I'm an international person, immigrated here, working, but also the background from the different culture outside of the United States. But also myself, I have a lot of exposure to the international individuals while I was growing up, including also like, my spiritual belief and my friendship. I had, several friends. Some of my best friends were international students, the third culture kids themselves, and also like the ethnic minorities in Japan. So that just like I had a fortunate to have exposure to them, and my spiritual belief were also coined to the cross-cultural kids. So yeah, so I just always say like I'm not third culture kids, but I have some similarity, but not everything. But I really love learning and supporting the individual in the third culture kids, and also, of course, as well as the cross-cultural kids.
Thank you for that. And for listeners, I believe the most recent edition of Third Culture Kids Growing Up Among Worlds is the one where the authors introduce the concept of cross-culture kids, right? I believe so, eh?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a Pollock, and
Yes.
I try to remember which edition it came in, but I think it was
I think it's the third or the fourth.
Yeah, I think
yes.
it was
And the idea is that it's the most it's the highest possible kind of label, cross-culture kids, and so third culture kids are one possible version of cross-culture kids, right? So that's an important distinction to make. Thank you for that. So wonderful to hear your story there. So 14 years about, in St. Louis.
Yes.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
And for how many years have you been at your current university?
So the faculty, I've been here, this is my 4th year.
Okay.
So yes, at the faculty, I've been here for 4th year now. But other student,
Right.
in total, I think I spent 9 years.
Yeah.
Almost. Yes. So because I had a gap year, so that's why 14 years, yes. So I think 9 years, almost 10 years. Other students got my master and PhD from the same university, and I'm very fortunate to be invited and have this opportunity to work here again. It's in the same university.
You belong to the inventory.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm very fortunate to have this. So yeah.
Nice. Great. So your research paper is called Experiences of Confucian Asian College Students with Third Culture Kid Backgrounds. Right? And at the very beginning of your paper, you mentioned that TCKs can face challenges relating to identity and belonging. And even depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, all is possible. But then you also introduce us to the subset of TCKs, namely Confucian Asian adult TCKs. And did you coin the abbreviation? Because you did, right? You did, because I put it into my reading out aloud research paper app, and it said CAATCKs, and I was like, what? So it's CAATCKs. right?
CAATCKs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It took it as a word in itself. That's interesting.
Yeah, it sounded it out. It was very funny. So, in your paper, you argue that this subset of TCKs faces the same challenges, but in ways that are intertwined with their cultural identities. So, before we move any further, can you tell us a little bit more about this new category, about the CAATCKs? So, CAATCKs, please.
Yes, of course. So, as I say, like I have always just like surrounded by third culture kids, friends, and also families that who have a background of international. So they were just like always like part of my just like very close group of people I cared about, and also as a counselor, I work with several like third culture kids, and some of them came from the Eastern Asian countries, and I've noticed that there was not really existing study talk about specific about this group of people. There are many studies about TCKs out there, and I really love reading each of them, but sometimes when you have such a big category with complex group of people, you might miss some uniqueness and importance of each of these subgroup. So I wanted to like learn more about how is their cultural background from that Confucius background impacted their identity development. And so I coined it of this Confucius Asian adult TCK is because of that. I specifically wanted to learn more about this Confucius culture, which is that based on the Chinese philosophist Confucius, and really like he was like I even like kind of Google like when actually he was lived, and it was like 479 BC, like that was like when he says like he passed. So it was like such a long time ago, but we have still so much influence from this philosophy, especially like in some Eastern Asian countries, including definitely China, South Korea, and Japan, and other Eastern countries. So just wanted to see like how this like unique philosophy still impacting individual, especially for those with a TCK background.
Right. So as you mentioned, so we're talking about people from Japan, China, Korea, any other Asian countries, or is that the three more?
These are like, it says like Eastern, like when you look up like Eastern countries, so Eastern Asian countries where have that idea of their philosophies from Confucius philosophy. So definitely like, can be like even like, Chinese immigrants in other countries can be, influenced because there are many Chinese immigrants, and also like, anyone from like South Korea's, and I cannot really speak for North Korea because I'm not too familiar with how that cultural impact is. But other Eastern Asian countries or individual who have some roots to the Eastern Asian country definitely have some influence, but different level. Just level of the influence quite different, but there are some like foundations of the impact from this philosophy.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because one of the themes that we keep brushing up against as Andrea and I meet new people on this podcast is the need to consider intersectionality in TCK research. And so you are in a way talking about this, right? That a TCK, at some level, a TCK is a TCK, but at another level, a TCK is not necessarily, if you've met one, you haven't necessarily met all of them. So let's get very specific here about Confucian Asian TCKs. You mentioned right off the bat in your paper that there are two important concepts, at least, in Confucianism that impact these individuals, these CAA TCKs. I won't attempt to mention them in what I assume is their perhaps Mandarin pronunciation, but it's filial piety and loyalty. Can you tell us a bit more about these?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna, embarrass myself try to pronounce these because I don't speak Chinese so well.
Yes.
So yeah, I appreciate that. Filial piety is that it's one of these two, and the others too, of course, core core philosophies of this Confucius philosophy, but I specifically chose these two, how it's going to impact the experience of their CAATCKs and Confucius Asian adult TCKs. So the fear parity is about like respecting parents, and that is like very common values and moral in across many cultures, but also that Confucius philosophy really emphasize that respect not only the parents but ancestors. Maybe you have never met the ancestors, but that comes down to generations of the connections. And that would create this like very unique hierarchical relationship. So that is like a filial piety. That is, I assume, I kind of like coined that it would impact the experience among that Confucius Asians individuals, and definitely including TCKs. And the loyalty, next one, is another core part of this, but it's very, very much about loyalty, like as we kind of think about in English, like loyal to institution, loyal to rulers, authority. So in the, Confucius really like specifically talk about it is important to be respectful, be having like very high moral, and present yourself in certain ways as expected and encouraged by society. And that is another thing that you may see in some collectivist culture, but these two connected together can give like both, of course, like support for the Confucius Asians communities, as well as some negative impact, especially if they step outside of the community, which I would love to talk about more, like about how that would impact TCKs later.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
And it's especially, it comes to mind that if the CAATCKs go to westernized countries, especially those two themes are completely different, right?
There's quite a disparity.
There's a huge discrepancy where, let's say, respect for parents and elders is not really given, and also to authority. So yeah, huge difference.
Yeah, and that's what I found it very interesting. Like, and of course, like, going to into the different culture, host culture, people experience reverse culture shock, and when they go back to reverse culture shock, but culture shock can be even greater, or that's just like unique, because what they have been raised, this is right, is not going to be the same anymore. But however, in their household, maybe still they are expecting and valuing this culture, so they have this bicultural experience in the host culture.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, you then explain how these cultural characteristics create external expectations and internal motivation for CAATCKs, as well as particular challenges relating to identity and belonging. Can you go a little bit further into that?
Of course. So, there's expectation, like it's very much of like, what I'm understanding, because I live myself in the Confucius influence society. And also I stepped outside of that society. So there's a lot of the internal expectation, like what I should be based on what I have learned. And it's kind of unique and like very nice balance and dancing of the internal and external expectation, how each of the community members should behave. So there is like some like self pressure, I need to meet this specified expectation by society, and it's very like hard to put it into even words, because there is sometimes no written clear rule. It's more like what society defines. So this is going to be more challenging for TCKs, for like, especially for those like, moving around different countries, not only just one, but multiple countries, and come back to their home country, like after years. They may have different rules. They may have different like social expectation, but they just don't know what it is. So their reverse culture shock could be even greater, but no one would try to explain to them. And kind of like, this is my own biases and also like my like own like negative, that's just like challenging my self-challenging experience. But sometimes like societies, because they really care about hierarchy, they care about this like smooth and harmony in the society, they may not have much capacity to re-explain or support those who have left the society when they decide to come back. So it is definitely difficult, especially like hierarchy is so important, and there's a way to speak, there is a how to like, handle everything. And if you just don't know that, it's just coming back to that society physically or just like joining like in any capacity could be challenging for Confucius Asian adult third culture kids.
Because you mentioned also that then they would be perceived as outsiders, right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Do you, I don't know how if and how regularly you visit Japan nowadays, but do you get some of that from having spent 10 years, at least 10 years in the States? Do you, is there a part in which you're seen as an outsider, or you've taken in some culture that isn't yours by your Japanese peers?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because of COVID, I actually didn't go back until last year, and it was also my time that for me to like wrap up my PhD program, everything. So I actually didn't go back for like 5-6 years to Japan until last year, and that was a huge reverse culture shock for not only like thinking everything, like even like just example like the shop I used to go is gone, right? So all like all the people know about these like celebrities, I have no idea who this person is. So like these small things adds up a lot of stressor. But on top of that, like I was kind of like made fun of, like I speak differently. Like I have a apparent accent in Japanese now. I dress up differently. And it was very funny because before I went back to Japan, I specifically tried to choose and buy new clothes. Look like Japanese clothes, like not like, traditional Japanese clothes, but I looked into like X and other like Google, like what are the trend of Japanese people?
Japanese fashion.
Right, Japanese fashions. And I was like, okay, I try to like, buy these things like as much as, reasonable price. And showed up to Japan, and it was like, oh wow, you look so Americanized. Like this is the most Japanese clothes I could find in my town. So it was like that, all of these like comments from everyone was just shocking. Like I couldn't really do enough to be back part of this community anymore. So it just kept a reminder. And among my Japanese friends here, they usually say like, Yuima, you are so westernized, you're Americanized. And I really don't know what is not like Western Americanized like person, because I cannot really even have that image anymore. It's just I'm me, but apparently I'm not really Japanese anymore. However, at the same time, I try to cherish my Japanese side, especially recently. From last year, I wear kimono, and that is a Japanese traditional clothes once a week at least. My husband challenged me for the kimono challenge. And he says like, originally he said I should wear kimono 365 days. And I'm like, there's no way I can do it. I don't, I want to separate my personal thing and my work. But that's something I try to like cherish my own way of my culture. But it's really not easy.
Yes, it's quite a challenge, eh? Very, very interesting. And on top of all that, and you do mention this in the paper also, and it's interesting to talk about, CAATCK. So on top of all these external expectations and internal motivations in terms of identity and belonging to the group and filial piety and loyalty, they also have to contend with certain stereotypes that are imposed on them by Western cultures. Maybe listeners will have some ideas of what these stereotypes can be, because some of those are quite quite popular, let's say, or have been with us for a while. But what do you refer to when you talk about these stereotypes?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, especially in the Western countries, is, I would say like more like in the US, one of the stereotype that impact Asians communities like model minority. So maybe some listeners are familiar with the term, but the model minority, for those like not familiar with, it's about so the Asian communities like in the US, a minoritized community, but this is like this stereotype is more like they are better, like socioeconomic status level comparison to non-Asian community. So it would impact Asian community very much, because that is just like our needs and our voices can be unheard. That you are just like, you have so much of like great economy, why are you whining about it? And also that discourage Asian community like to even seek out for help. So like, the Asian communities like tend to be like ranked as the lowest to look for any like mental health support. And also like, this model minority ignores that important factors of the how diverse the Asian community itself is. So Asian, communities in the world is a 2/3 of the entire continent. That's all Asian. So like when you say like Asian, like who are we actually talking about? But we tend to put the community into this small one category, and if you are belong to the Asian community, everyone is well off, and that is not really true. So yeah, so that is like an Asian minority, model minority stereotype. But when it comes to Asian, Confucius Asian adult TCKs, that will be could be more like adding like more unique challenges. When I was talking to the participants, they just like some people like have never like had any interaction with Asian with so much international background. So many, when they like see the Asian TCK, like, oh, like why you speak English so well, right? And like that is a microaggressions. But maybe the Asians like in this Asian TCK have grown up in that Western country for years, even though their passport might say different countries. But it's just like people don't really think about that is possible for Asian people like immigrating and moving around the world, because it's somehow like, unfortunately, some people in the society believe that Asians just like are always immigrated, especially in Western country. They just only immigrate and they just never belongs to the Western country. So that is also another microaggressions that Asians, immigrants, and especially TCKs receive, because there's just no understanding of that, fill the gap of that knowledge.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for explaining that. Yeah.
Yeah. I know a friend of mine from Hong Kong, she gets asked the same question. And I mean, Hong Kong is, amongst others, English speaking, right? So yeah,
Yes.
It's making the world understand that there are lots of countries in Asia.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So if we go into your paper, the first question we would like to ask you about your paper is regarding the participants. If you can tell us how you recruited them, who those participants were, give us some information about age, identity, gender, ethnic origin, and all that. That would be great.
And if I can add to that also, if you could explain, what was your basic objective, your basic goal going into this this participant recruitment? What was the goal exactly of the paper?
So goal, you mean like how many participants wanted to have, or
no? What were you studying exactly? Because I don't think we've mentioned it so far. Yeah. And then
sure,
get into the participants, who they were, and so on.
Yeah, so I chose that, of course, Confucius Asian and adult TCK. So anyone who are above 18 years old, I consider them as adult. It's kind of US standard. And also that who have gone to their university, like graduated from college within 5 years. So I specifically like had this like 5 years window because I wanted to learn about their experience being college as TCK and from the Confucius Asian culture. So Confucius Asian culture really have that this expectation, hierarchical, societal expectation, but at the same time, like, there are a lot of like importance of the connections in the group. So how does that cultural background impact for the third culture kids from this country, from these countries in the college where they meet so many different people, and how they made that friendship, how they made that connection with each other. So that was my purpose of learning more about of the college experience of their third culture kids from the Confucius Asian cultures. And what I did use for the sampling, I used a two method of the purposeful sampling and snowball sampling. So purposeful sampling, like I already have some mindset of like where I wanted to post and where I can maybe recruit more people in the term of platform. So like I found a few social medias in the Facebook, I found some social media on Reddit, and also like just like I think like I use a lot of social media just try to recruit people. And snowball sampling is just like asking around that those I know may have somebody who might refer their friends or family with a background that I'm looking for. So that's how I recruited these like people, and I end up having like 11 numbers. And I'm going to tell you like later like why I just like finished at 11 numbers. But out of the 11 numbers, a majority of participants were female. That's could be I put it in the limitation of my study. So they are self-identified female. So there was like only a few self-identified male, and I didn't have, unfortunately, no one like who identify like other than female or male in my studies. And because of that, there my criteria, like for those graduate college within 5 years, I had an age range of the 21 to 25. So that was like, for those like graduate, like about to graduate or graduating, or have graduated very recent years. And so the majority of them, like, coming from like Japan because of my proprietor connections, and also my names is like represent the Japanese. So 6 of them actually were Japanese, and one as a Canadian Chinese, and whose parents were from China, and one was Taiwanese American, with the parents of Taiwanese origins, and one as a Korean, and one Chinese, and one person was bi-ethnic individual with parents of the Japan and China. So that's kind of like a background of the participants. And what I found it very fascinating in this study was like the range of like their international traveling and experience outside of their passport country. So during their childhood, that range of like 3.5 years to 18 years that they were in different countries, like in the outside of countries, and that is a medium of the 9.8. So like almost 10 years among all of these like 11 participants were spending their childhood outside of their passport country. And also like many of them like some of them like chose university in the different countries within outside of their home country. So like 5 of them chose Japan, another 5 chose America to go to the university, and 1 person chose England for their college. And not all of them like actually have their college experience. Like, I'm sorry, not all of them have grown up in these like country that they decided to go to college, but they just like found a place that they felt like most comfortable, maybe because of their roots or because of the visa process.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Thank you for that complete description of your sample there. Okay, so let's imagine that I'm a participant in your study. What would you ask me? What kind of questions did you ask me? So stated otherwise, what did you ask of participants? What kind of questions did you ask them? And also, you mentioned that you use this approach called transcendental phenomenology, which sounds awesome. It should be the name of an album, a music album or something, transcendental phenomenology, in order to generate information with what they were telling you. So can you first tell us about what kind of questions you would ask them, and tell us about this transcendental phenomenology and its advantages and how you used it to make data emerge from this sample, basically.
Yes, of course. So I only have 5 questions to that interview question to the participants, and still like I could get like at least 30 minutes to like 1 hour of each of the interviews. I think the shortest only one shortest one was 30 minutes, and most of them like close to 1 hour. And my question like designed specifically about their relationship in college. So like example of like, what your experience in college, and what was your friends network in college. And also after that, I asked about their like, international experience of being third culture kids, like how that experience impacted their social life in college. And additionally, I asked about their specific Asian cultural background, how it impacted their social life in college. And like, last one is open question, like anything else you like to share. So, as you can see, like very specific to the social network relationship, and there are other like, 2 very important intersectionality identities of being a third culture kids and also the Confucius Asians.
Right.
So that's after I got these like, great rich the interview data from them, I use this like transcendental phenomenology. So this is really about the phenomenology is really about getting that shared experience phenomenon of this group of individuals I chose. So the first things I really needed to do was bracket. So set aside all of my pre-existing biases, knowledge, assumptions about third culture kids, and definitely Confucius Asian cultures because I grew up in it. So like I did like just this intense notes like what I know about third culture kids, what I feel about third culture kids, and also what I think about Asian culture. All of things like put it like on the I just bracket that I wrote them down.
Yeah.
So I put it aside so that I can like make sure these are my existing assumptions will not interfere when I'm doing the coding. So that when I did a coding, and I don't recommend any of the researcher to do it, but I was recommended that I did it, was like like I literally transcribed every word by myself. It was a great experience, took forever. So, and nowadays we have so much advanced technology that you can use transcribing easily, but I still enjoy to transcribe every word into like, the Word documents. Took me like weeks to complete that for 11 participants. And after, yeah, it was like nightmare, but I finished.
I don't recommend it.
Yes, I don't. I mean, I recommend my students to do, but it's hard. So it's just time consuming, I would say. And after that coding process, so I did a line to line coding process. I just read it, each of the code line of the transcript, and like just use that highlight and put it in comments. What it means? What does this person saying? Like, what's kind of feeling? What is like content of this like experience this person was sharing with me without really thinking what it means. I just like did coding first, and after that I put that each of these like the block of the interview transcript into the Excel sheet with that coding what I put it, maybe like anxiety, loneliness, identity crisis, whatever. And after that, I just put them together in a margin, bigger theme to see what would generate from there. And I did this process for 9 participants because at that point, I started noticing that more and more people like saying pretty much the same thing. So that is a process of that saturations that could be maybe like it's just like the old data is at the saturation part, meaning like I may not find any new data. So to make sure that I'm not, prematurely finishing this data process, I saved the 2 other participants. So like out of the 11, I did a 9 participants for 2 participants to check the saturation. So I did like 9 coding first, and I checked the other 2 participants to see if they have similar experience to make sure that I'm not finishing it up too quickly. So that was kind of like my process of the data collections here, and also data analyzing.
Very interesting and very detailed. Right, that's the I had heard about this because I'm a and I think Andrea, most of your experience also is more quantitative with quantitative papers, right? And in I had heard in qualitative research this idea of a point of saturation where you've gotten the themes, you think you've gotten most of the experience, and then that was very interesting to use two participants to check if you'd gotten all the themes. Is that a practice that's usually done, or is that something that your intuition told you to do?
It was a part of the practice. So
it's part of the practice.
It's like, I knew like I have to check a saturation because if I keep getting like participants, it would never end. And so it's a part of the practice to hit the saturations process. But I know not everyone do this, but this will just at least increase the reliability of the study. So I highly recommend to do that.
Very interesting.
If we go to your findings, I know you said there are three main themes and that emerge from the data analysis: connection and belonging, disconnection, and identity. But you also broke each of these into 2 to 4 sub-themes. So how many themes were there in total?
There were actually more. But they were like, I don't remember, sorry. I wish I do remember, but I just like selected the most the biggest and most impactful one. I think they were like, I want to say like 7. Because the original study was for my dissertation first. So, and I, we did it again for the data analyzing and everything. And like, we kind of like chime in, like you think about what is actually bigger themes, and I came back to the 3 themes, the biggest themes here.
Yeah, the question just came up when you said that you found so many different ones, and I thought, you have 3 main ones, but so definitely many more. Okay. Mathieu, you can take the next one.
You want me to ask that one? Right. So let's get into these broad themes. So the first kind of broadest theme is you call it connection and belonging. And here you found that participants often spoke about perhaps 3 forms of connection, namely connection with adult third culture kids, connection with Confucian Asian communities, and connection with non-TCKs and Asian communities. So what emerged from those what kind of data and information, what did people tell you about connection and belonging, and specifically related to these 3 types of connection? What can you tell us about that?
So one of the things emerged from me, like, reading these like data and like having relationship was like there are many, like all of the participants mentioned some of their needs for the connections in many different forms, like either like a friendship, or maybe could be like with the professors at the college, maybe connection with their home cultures, or the host cultures. So that this like a theme is about like especially like they felt like connected with. So there are 3 part of group of like a community they shared was like when one was a Confucian Asian community. So like they joined that students organization group that represent maybe their ethnicity or their racial background. And other ones like in connection with non-TCK. So like it could be including like, the host, like students in the host cultures, host country, like they made like some connections, friends. Could be like also the professors and others that they felt like some kind of connection with and they really appreciated. And also like, I'm looking for the last one, the Asian individuals. So it can be definitely like, Asian people like without TCK backgrounds, and they find, could make some connections with other Asian individuals without having maybe TCK background, or with the TCK background, but they felt connection over the cultural similarities. And it was very interesting that, especially when it's, comes to like these Asian communities and individuals, many of them like talked about, they felt like somehow, kind of it felt like closer to, either like even regardless if they are coming from the similar Asian background or not, but just like having the Asian culture made them feel more comfortable. So that would help them to like feel like drawn to them to more like specific to the cultural group. And they really needed that connections. And that really helped them to get through that in college lifestyles and sometimes homesickness and all kind of things.
Right.
And one person said it's natural since you share a lot of life experiences, right?
Yes, they did a lot of life experience, and then they was just felt just like emerged that very naturally to like create the connections. And I think that is something like TCKs in general, like have that in common, that they feel connected to like, they just like very like, I think like Pollack said, like it's like a social chameleon that feel like, can merge into and also like make connection with anybody. But I think like, this community, like, that my population, the population I study is also have that similarity. Like they wanted to have connection and they're really like very good at making connection with wider range of people.
And also they're very quick. Sorry, Matthew.
No, go ahead, Andrea.
No, I just want to say also TCKs make friends very easily and very quickly, right? And then they're very tightly knit and very strong friendships right away.
They can, yes. I think it's just like, and I think that some of the things I felt, I heard from the participants, like they were like two range of like, they feel like really, really connections easily. And also they were like wanted to make connection and they couldn't. And that will come to the next theme. But that was like very difficult for them because in the past, maybe they felt like, no, I don't want to say easier, but it was like, they could be flexible and they could be like making friends, but it was mainly like TCK network. And now they're in a college where not everyone's TCK. So like now how to make a connection was like, could be challenging for some of them.
Is there a sense, and you might have already in a way answered this, but I'm going to ask it again just because I'm coming at it from a different perspective. Do you... Did you feel that the need to connect with other Asian students was pretty much the same as the need to connect with TCKs, other TCK students, independently of what their ethnic origin was?
I think so. Yes, I think it's very important for them to have these connections. And like they were like really looking for what they can share with. So is it Asians, like, Confucian Asians or just Asian cultural background, or it's a TCK background? If they come together, that'd be great. And some of them actually made friends in the specific, like in age, the TCK with a similar age cultural group background, and it worked out for that person greatly. But the person mentioned that interview that she had a really, really, really hard time to find these other two people they could feel connected to. So yeah, I think it is just like very like similar kind of like art and needs in like in either ways. But it just connection itself was very important for them.
Yeah.
So the first theme was connection and belonging, and the second was disconnection. Right. So, and you noticed again two ways. So one was disconnection with the home culture, and the other one was in terms of differences with the non-third culture kids.
Yes, right? And this is actually one of the biggest theme I just kept hearing from across all the participants, how they felt sometimes like isolated, pushed back. And I really felt for them, especially they were talking about like how they felt like pushed back from like those who they thought they could be friend with. And especially that's they usually like their home country's college student. So like, they have like same the nationality, the background, the cultural background, and of course, like other Confucian Asian third culture kid, they thought like, okay, I could be friend with you because we came from the same country, and there was some pushback. They were like, oh, cannot be actually friends. And that was very, I think, one of the painful things that I have heard, that they would just like a lot of disappointment, and that would encourage them to like look for the different group of people to feel like connected to. But that was like, kept coming back and back all the time. It's just non-TCK group of people. Depending on that, the participant, they kind of use different words, like either like non-TCK group, or they sometimes like they say Junjapa with a like pure Japanese that can be translated in that way. So like, felt like disconnection with the Japanese community, and they were like, oh, these Junjapa students really didn't really understand where I was coming from. Or like some people were told that they were too like westernized, they were not enough to be a Koreans in the certain ways that, just how they talk, how they dress up, how they refer people. So all of these kind of things, like, just remind them of the disconnection, that they are not part of this community anymore, even they are. So that impact them so much in their mental health.
Yeah.
And you mentioned
were
also
essentially caught in liminality, right? This concept of like in between.
Yes.
Like you're not them, but you're not us, but you're not us enough to be them.
Right.
Right. That's a source of stress for college students. You already have a lot of stress when you're a college student.
Right.
And now you have to deal with being this in between where you're not sure. Right. Interesting. Sorry, I cut you off there, Andrea. I couldn't help.
Yeah, that's okay. No, but yeah, absolutely right. And also, I know that one person you interviewed said that I realized that Japanese people are not really interested in other cultures and in foreigners. So, yeah.
Yes, and I think it's very much of like, how the Confucius culture is very talking about the importance of like keeping this hierarchy. So, and that hierarchy can be also, some maybe think like that is only possible by keeping that door really close and tight. So the community is very tight and close, and even like international mobilities and everything, but their just mentality is very close sometimes. So if you are outside of country, when they try to come back, they're like, no, you are not part of us anymore. And it's it goes down to like my next theme, but I want to save it. But that's really like impacting that Confucius Asians third culture kids experience in college.
Yeah, you're making me think so much, Yuima, about that. Like, because I was thinking, okay, this idea, if we just take these two values of filial piety and loyalty, right? And we're talking about Confucius Asian third culture kids, but I'm fighting against the tendency that I know, which is biased, to think that like Western third culture kids don't have anything like that they're taking to their experience. And I'm thinking, no, actually, because I'm a Western person, I'm probably unconscious. I'm probably unconscious of some of the values that impacted me as a third culture kids in the same way these values are impacted them. And so you're making me rethink all of it. And that's usually good research. I would invite listeners to think, if you're a person who's culturally from the West, what might be some values that could impact, let's say, you as a college student, if you're a TCK, that you're not even seeing right now because you've been in it all your life, right? Very, very, very interesting. Your third theme, I'm trying to get to it because I was so excited that I touched my computers and the questions went. I touched my computer and the questions went flying.
You want me to read it?
I've got it.
You've got them? Okay.
Your third broad theme was identity. All right, and you mentioned identity a few minutes ago, and that we were going to get to it. So let's get to it. You noticed that participants were talking about the influence and impact of their highly mobile lifestyles on their identities, and that they were doing so in diverse ways, in different ways. They were talking about the complexity of dealing with their identity. They were talking about their feeling like an outsider. They were talking about their Asian identity, but they were also talking about their world citizen identity. So that's a very rich kind of space to go into. What can you tell us about this space of identity for your participants?
Yes, and that is so my research topic and interest always about something related to identity. It can be like national identity, professional identities, and now it's the TCKs identity. And it just like always excite me when I think about identity. And one of the things I found it very interesting in this study, and I use the theoretical framework of the social identity theory, which is like a society defined that person's identity. And depending on which society you belong to, your identity keeps shifting. So like example, and it's really easy for me to kind of like use this example because it helped me to understand, like, let's take a female athlete. And a female athlete, when this person is in the group of the male, regardless if they're athlete or not, she might identify as a female. But if they're part of the athlete group, she might more likely identify as a athlete. So that's identity change where they belong to, and that's kind of like something I found in these participants a lot, that how difficult for them to identify who they are. And I think this is very common for the TCKs, that, that where are you from questions is very one of the hardest questions to answer. And one participant like joked about that. He says like, I have to give like hours of the explanation where I'm coming from, and, talk about where I was born to like 5 different countries I have grown up in, why I'm in this country. So like, he says like, I usually ask, do you want to have a simpler answer or the complete good answer
Yes.
to my identity? And
Yeah.
that is how the TCK is like, it's very simple questions, like for someone like me, because I'm coming from like Japan, and that's the only country I grew up in. I'm a CCK, but for someone who grew up in like 5 different countries, or even like 2 different countries, it's so much rich. So when that's using from the social identity theory, it's very difficult to define what your identity is. So one thing is like, complexity identity is coming from that. And also like, feeling outsider. And that's easily, I was talking earlier about how the participant felt rejections and isolation from their group of people. They felt they were family and friends. But also like, several people mentioned that even in the TCK group, they felt isolated. And that was very interesting, like intake for me to take that, because again, like, other researcher, I see a TCK as a group of people and a much larger group of people, but I just sometimes like, forget how rich and how diverse this group of people. And so like, one participant mentioned that she has grown up in like, I think South Africa. And it came back to that, and joined the rest of other TCKs in the different, like, country. And even she was belonging to the other Confucian Asian TCK, because she was only one who has grown up in that country, she felt different. So there was a disconnection. And always like, wherever I go, I will be outsider. And that's just like a reminder to like, just a daily life in their life, and also then the college. And third one, Asian identity, and many of them like really value and they enrich their Confucius Asian identity. They talked about like, without me trying, I noticed that I'm actually like, very Asians, like value Asian by maybe sharing dishes together with other people. Like, sharing is one of the things kept coming back in my participants, that they were saying like sharing food, sharing music, sharing like having the similar concept or similar knowledge is important. Sharing the family story is important. And also reciprocate, like if you give something, if I, just like kind of like mutual respect, reciprocate is one of the another things they found it important. And like, one person said like, no, he was like reading Confucius, like, philosophy book, because
Right.
he was just like thinking about his own identity. He's like, oh yeah, like I noticed I'm reading the book, and that is a part of the Asian identity. So it's like this like very complex, that regardless how they were pushed back from their maybe like Asian community, that you're not part of us anymore, you're not really like enough to be Confucius Asian, but they still have that. It is important for them and they value that. And that goes to their last theme that I found is world citizen. And world citizen is, people like, the participant talk about how they can be very flexible. And it's something like, I have heard it over and over again from like, other TCKs with or without the Confucius Asian background through like career. But it is a very profound identity for them because that's what would give them some sense of grounding that I am belonging to this world. I'm okay to be unsure, defining that specific identity. I can be flexible. I can be friend with many people. I'm very unique and international person. So many people like talked about like how they have like this global mindset that they can really think about holistic view about news and about social issues and all kind of things. So that was kind of, I coined it the world citizens as a part of their identities.
So they're working through all of this at the same time that they have to take their courses and pass their exams.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just a lot going on in their mind. And, yeah, it's a really busy life.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, impressive.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking about all the 4 ways that you use that you found, right? How they defined identity. It's very complex. Very complex. Yeah. So if you're taking all these results together and from a broader perspective, what could you say about the Confucian Asian ATCK experience? ATCK experience. Oh my God, it's getting difficult with all these acronyms.
So I think it's important, like, I said it a few times before, but it's just important for us to like just have this mindset that how diverse this community is. And I really, really enjoy learning about their experiences from the different perspective, but also like, found it very still interesting. This like Confucius, like who lived like 1,000 years ago, still impact many of us. Yeah. And so it's just like, fascinating. I was very impressed and fascinated by how we do things without actually thinking and how it's actually impact, regardless if we have left the country or not. So that's something like, I was just like reflecting on that.
And did you use the word Confucius with them? Did you bring this up?
I specifically said Asian.
Okay.
So in the interview questions, it was Asians. Okay. And like, yeah, so I didn't really use Confucius because I wanted to avoid that leading question. But it was more like Asian, like give me like something you think about Asian. And that's what I got was pretty much, they were talking about families, like, expectations. Many of them actually talked about how they were expected to meet the family expectation there and how they were taught to be respectful, like value their culture, value their languages, and just like juggling all of that, they're assimilating, not only acculturating, but assimilating into their host culture and the college life. And at the same time, they are seeing certain way because of how they look by society that, and also that they just constantly getting message from the family members and community, like how they need to be in certain ways. So it just like, it was very fascinating that to hear that even without me trying to talk about coin that, define Confucius Asian, they still talked about it.
Right.
The theme still came up without mentioning the word. Yeah.
So that's interesting. That says a lot about their experience. It's I won't say a richer experience than other TCK experience because that would be hard to compare, but definitely a very rich and unique experience in that sense.
And a red thread, right? A red thread throughout all the countries.
It's common. Yeah. A common thread there. Yeah. So, would you be willing to say that you have put your finger on the Confucian Asian ATCK experience, or do you think there are limits to your study that kind of we should take this with perhaps a little grain of salt. And if there are limits, what other studies do you think should be done to further investigate this interesting population of ATCKs?
Yes, of course. So, yeah, my study, of course, is not perfect. There were so many limitations and some flaws in that. The study, like including the just chosen language, was English because that was a language that we could all understand together across the different countries. And the TCKs that, and not all TCKs spoke English like as their native level. Like they were some like, because they grew up in the not only like English speaking countries at the TCK, but they were like speaking English as a second language. So that's kind of like, definitely put some like barriers to some participants. And also like, since I was not really communicating with them in their native language, I probably have missed some important piece of their native language aspect because some Japanese participants, they kind of couldn't really translate some like nuance in English. So they chose to tell me in Japanese and I could understand because I was Japanese and I asked them to translate into English. So I would not gonna be putting my words into theirs. I couldn't do it like other like half of the participants, 5 other participants were not Japanese because I didn't speak their languages. So if I could speak their, first languages or like, both language, English and another language, probably I could make it much richer experience. The finding could be even different and better. Also the gender was mainly like again like a female, self-identified female, and a female according to studies like tend to have like values and connection more than males. So if I had a male participants more, maybe that finding especially in the connection disconnections could be seen as a different. Other things, the sexual orientation, like I think I mentioned it before. I didn't ask the sexual orientation, but more like gender. So if I asked for sexual orientations, probably there was some like another intersectionality they experience, and that could have played into the TCK experience. So there's like so and so and like so many different things that I could have done differently. I wish I could have enough resources and time to do. And another important aspect is like all of them were business TCKs. I didn't have any missionary or military diplomat on TCKs. So if I had other group of TCKs, their experience could be different because the business TCK, we know like have a specific type of the experience, like, including the growing up experience, right? Like compared to missionary and military and diplomat. So these are things that we could have, I could have done like differently. But I just didn't have anyone who have that background. So, wish I could do it, and maybe hopefully I will do it in the future.
Right. So that would be one study, a future study maybe to include more diverse groups of TCKs, right?
Yes.
In a sense, to include more intersectionality pieces like gender, sexuality, and interesting. Yes, I definitely think that would make the picture richer and richer. I will say this for listeners who may not be used to doing research, because it's kind of a niche thing when you think about it. When you hear limits on a study, it's definitely not because the person did a bad job. Every study has so many limits, and researchers know them and they feel bad about them, but you have to produce some research paper at some point. And the idea is to take all the research on a topic, each with their limits, and look at it globally and find something that comes out of that. So that is not an issue with Yuima's research. That is very much normal. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and I would also like to add, you need to publish that as well.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You don't only find the limits, but they make you publish them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have to mention them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what do you think, Yuima? How can your study be used to help TCKs, especially Confucian Asian adult TCKs, in their life? And I know you mentioned also that if counselors understood the CAATCKs better, the world would be a better place.
Understanding is usually a good thing.
Yeah, understanding is, yeah. So what do you think? Any concrete tips how that you can take from your study and translate them into a counselor life, student life, and make it feasible?
In the counseling program, since I teach the multicultural counseling classes, I always invite TCK guest speakers to kind of like introduce this topic. Many students are not aware or they may have heard, but you just never know what this is about. So I just increasing that understanding, TCK exists, that's like the first things, but also important of thinking about how that intersectionality impact the TCK's life so much and how unique it is. It's just important for us to keep in mind as the professionals and just someone the ally of the TCKs. Important another thing is the microaggressions, that we tend to the TCKs, especially Confucian Asian TCKs, receive that because of the racial background, what they're presenting, they're based on their appearance and what they have the background that underneath of all of that. So microaggression, we need to really be careful when we approach someone we don't really know, and it applies to anybody, not only for Confucian Asian TCKs, but everyone so rich in this global society. So just a reminder of ourselves. And there's actually I have another published article about the TCKs and regarding about how to support a TCK. So circle of the relationship. You can probably Google it, but that is my models of how to support it, especially for those in the TCK group, to help them to realize that different connections and social connections and tune with their support they may have overlooked. So that's something a tool that you can probably use and just study, talk, have a more awareness, challenge your biases.
Yep.
Very good. So there's much work to do to support these young people. I'm curious. Do you in a typical, well, I don't know how to word this. Let's say in a typical semester or in a typical school year, how many students do you realize are TCKs where you're teaching?
Not so many. Just maybe one student or two come up to me like, oh, I never realized I'm actually TCK.
Oh, right.
After my lecture. Yeah.
So how international is your university then?
Not so much. We are in the Midwest. Right? We are in the middle of it's a Midwest. We are center of the country. So there's so it's not much international. We have a racial diversity here, but not so much international diversity.
Oh,
but
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that is another reason probably many people just do not know much about TCKs. But it's interestingly for me to know, they're people come up to me oh, now I know why I was struggling so much. I never heard this term before, but it's actually about me. So it's fun to connect with students who actually are TCKs, but just never had the resources.
And do you have many?
No.
Sorry. And have you found that you have many national TCKs?
There are many of them
domestic
American,
TCKs.
Domestic. So there are most of them have traveled outside of country. So they're international TCK, but they're American domestic students. There were very few domestic TCK who have traveled in the US. Sometimes I introduce it as another kind of the term that we also have to kind of like be mindful about. It's not only about international, it's going to be like domestic, moving around. I think the Pollock was included in their study. But most of them have grown up outside of country, like military, most of the time. So, and they just never heard that TCK was part of them, like part of their identity.
Yeah. And it's an important, I know that many people, just when they understand that concept exists, they go, oh, they're able to see themselves from outside for the first time, go, oh, I understand this. And it can be so helpful. So it's interesting that your research can introduce that concept to some people. It can be very powerful. So good on you for that. Yes, I was looking at the your maybe we can just say for a few minutes, just one or two sentences about this. But you have another paper that you mentioned called "Experiences of." No, that's not true. It's the Circle of Trust. Let me just get it here. Circle of Relationship, not Circle of Trust, pardon me. Circle of Relationship, a counseling intervention for Confucian Asian adult third culture kids. So it's the idea that you took that data that you talked about today with us and you made a counseling intervention with it?
Yes, it comes with a case study about, and that's a fictional person. It like doesn't exist, but came up with some case. Came up with a study, case study, using how to use it step by step in the counseling intervention, counseling room to work with Confucian Asian third culture kids. Kind of like, considering of their unique background and what other things we can be mindful other counselor or clinicians.
It'd be wonderful to test that, to test the not necessarily the efficacy, but like what comes out of that circle of relationship intervention. Yeah, definitely. Well, listen, Yuima, we really appreciated you coming aboard on board this podcast. It was a wonderful talk. We're wondering any last words, any things you want to leave us with before we let you go?
No, it was a great experience. Thank you so much for this honor. I was very honored to be part of this. I'm very excited. I forgot how I can get excited about talking this.
Good. We're excited.
That was a very good surprise. Kind of like fueled me into doing more research about TCKs.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
That's kind of the plan too. We want to excite. We want to get excited. We want the audience to get excited, but we also want the researchers to get excited. That's
exactly. And I mean, there's a huge CAATCK population out there that could benefit from your research, knowing about it, reading it, and they will feel so seen once they discover it.
I hope so.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So thank you, folks, for listening, and we'll be back. We'll be back soon with another interesting researcher. But thank you again, Yuima, for this one. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the TCK Research Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Please subscribe, like, and share our podcast, and leave us a review. It really helps others find us. If you have any questions or comments, please write to us at tckresearchpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and we promise we'll answer all emails. We wish you a good day wherever you are, and we hope you'll join us again for the next episode.